My name's Nick, 37, and my wife, Jessica, 35, has been my world for the past 10 years. We've been married for 8 of those years, and I thought we had a solid thing going. I mean, we weren't perfect, who is? But I never thought we'd end up here. Jessica has always been the social one in our relationship. While I'm more of a stay-home-with-a-beer kind of guy, she thrives on being out and about. Girls' nights, charity events, networking parties, you name it, she's there, always looking flawless and turning heads. I used to love that about her. She was magnetic, the kind of person who lit up a room. Lately, though, things had started to feel off. For one, Jessica's girls' nights started happening more frequently. At first, it was once every couple of weeks, no big deal. But over the past 6 months, it became a weekly thing. She'd come home late, sometimes after midnight, smelling like a mix of expensive perfume and cheap beer. "Where'd you go tonight?" I'd ask casually, even though the knot in my stomach tightened every time. "Just the usual spot," she'd say, waving me off. Brittany and the girls were being crazy as always. She'd laugh, but it never quite reached her eyes. Then there were the little lies. Things that didn't add up. Like when she said she was at Brittany's house one night, but Brittany posted a story on Instagram of her at some rooftop bar. Or when she forgot her phone at work but spent the evening scrolling through it at home. Still, I told myself I was overthinking. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who starts fights over nothing. But the doubt was eating at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on. The final straw came when a close friend of mine, Matt, pulled me aside during a family barbecue. "Nick," he said, lowering his voice, "there's something I need to tell you, and you're not going to like it." I braced myself. Matt was a straight shooter, the kind of guy who didn't mince words. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach already in knots. "It's Jessica," he said. "I've been hearing things about her and some guy she's been meeting at that bar she loves." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What are you talking about?" "Look, I don't know for sure," he admitted. "But I've got a buddy who bartends there, and he says she's been showing up a lot, and she's not always with her friends." I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Here's the kicker. I'm a private investigator by trade. It's what I do for a living. Uncovering lies, exposing secrets. And now I had to turn those skills on my own wife. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After Matt's warning, I couldn't stop thinking about Jessica's late nights. My mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. As much as I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, my instincts told me otherwise. I knew what I had to do. The irony wasn't lost on me. Spending years tailing cheating spouses for a living, and now here I was, investigating my own wife. I hated myself for it, but I needed the truth. The next time Jessica announced a girls' night, I casually asked where she was headed. "Probably the Grove," she said, barely looking up from her phone. The Grove was her usual bar, a trendy spot downtown with overpriced drinks and loud music. "Have fun," I said, keeping my voice even. Once she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I stayed far enough behind that she wouldn't notice my car in her rearview mirror, though I doubted she was paying much attention. Sure enough, she pulled into the Grove's parking lot, stepped out of the car, and adjusted her dress in the reflection of the window. She looked stunning, hair curled, makeup perfect, wearing a tight red dress I didn't even know she owned. She walked into the bar, and I waited a few minutes before following. I left my car in a nearby lot and entered through the side door, careful to keep a low profile. The dim lighting and loud music made it easy to blend in. Jessica was at the bar, laughing with someone. It wasn't Brittany or any of her usual friends. It was a man. He was tall, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exuding that confident charm I knew Jessica was drawn to. She leaned in close to him, her hand lightly grazing his arm. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos, careful to keep my movements discreet. They were deep in conversation, completely oblivious to the world around them. After a few minutes, the man placed his hand on the small of Jessica's back, guiding her toward a table in the corner. I followed at a distance, finding a spot near the bar where I could watch without being seen. They ordered drinks, laughing and leaning into each other like a couple on a date. Every gesture, every glance between them felt like a dagger to my heart. Then, Jessica did something that shattered any lingering hope I had left. She kissed him. It wasn't a casual, friendly peck. It was passionate, deliberate. The kind of kiss that said, "You're the only one I want." I froze, my stomach churning. I'd seen this scenario play out countless times with other couples, but watching it happen to us, it was unbearable. I stayed long enough to see them leave the bar together, arm in arm. They walked to the man's car, where Jessica slid into the passenger seat without hesitation. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. The truth was staring me in the face, and there was no denying it anymore. Jessica was cheating on me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Jessica kissing that guy, sliding into his car like she hadn't just ripped my heart out. By morning, my exhaustion had morphed into something colder. Determination. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me or twist the story like I'd seen her do so many times before. No, this time I'd be prepared. Over coffee, I started piecing together my plan. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make sure there was no way for her to lie her way out of this. I spent the next few days gathering more evidence. Each night Jessica went out, I followed her, documenting everything. Different bars, the same guy. Their pattern was painfully predictable. Drinks, flirting, kisses, and then driving off together. I tracked them to his apartment one night, watching as the lights in his window flickered on and didn't go off for hours. I didn't need more proof after that, but I kept collecting it anyway. Photos, timestamps, videos. It was like building a case for a client, except this time the betrayal cut to the bone. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal at home. "Hey, how was your night?" I'd ask when she got back late, doing my best to sound casual. She'd smile, her lipstick slightly smudged. "Oh, same old Britney drama." You wouldn't believe what she said to the bartender. I wanted to scream, to throw the truth in her face right then and there. But I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about reacting on impulse. It was about taking control. The breaking point came a week later. Jessica was scrolling through her phone in bed, laughing at something on Instagram. I was sitting beside her, pretending to read a book, but my mind was miles away. That's when she said, "Nick, you've been so quiet lately. Everything okay?" The audacity. I looked at her, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, just busy with work. You know how it is." She nodded, satisfied with my answer, and went back to scrolling. I stared at her for a long moment, wondering how she could sit there so casually, so unaffected, while my entire world was falling apart. That's when I decided. It was time to end this charade. I called Matt the next day, filling him in on everything I'd uncovered. "Jesus, Nick," he said, his voice tight with anger. I was hoping I was wrong, but, damn, what are you going to do? "Confront her," I replied. "But I want her to know I'm not some clueless idiot she can manipulate. She needs to see that I know everything." Matt hesitated. "You sure you're ready for that?" "I have to be," I said firmly. And just like that, the plan was in motion. The day I decided to confront Jessica, I felt like a live wire, every nerve in my body on edge. I'd spent the morning organizing all the evidence. Photos, videos, timestamps, and even a log of every excuse she'd fed me over the past month. That evening, she came home around 10 p.m., earlier than usual but still late enough to confirm where she'd been. She waltzed in, her heels clicking against the floor, and gave me a quick, dismissive kiss on the cheek. "Hey, babe," she said breezily, tossing her purse onto the counter. "How was your day?" "Fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "How about yours?" "Oh, same old. Brittany got a little too drunk again. I swear, one of these days she's going to get us all kicked out of the Grove." She laughed, shaking her head like she hadn't just told a blatant lie. I nodded, watching her intently. "Funny. Brittany posted a story from her apartment tonight. Looked pretty quiet there." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Oh, she must have gone home early." I stayed with the other girls. You know how it is. This was classic Jessica. Quick on her feet, always ready with an explanation. But not this time. I do know how it is, I said, standing up and grabbing my laptop from the coffee table. In fact, I know exactly how it is. She tilted her head, confused, as I set the laptop on the kitchen counter and opened the folder labeled Jessica. What's this? She asked, her voice wary. Why don't you take a look? I replied, stepping aside so she could see the screen. Her eyes widened as the first image appeared. Her and the guy at the Grove, laughing at the bar. I clicked to the next one, then the next. By the time I got to the video of them kissing in the corner booth, her face had gone pale. Nick, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, I said, my voice ice cold. But let me save you the trouble. I already know about the guy. I know you've been sneaking around for weeks. And I know this has been happening while I've been sitting here, trusting you. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It's not what it looks like, she stammered. I laughed bitterly. Not what it looks like. Jessica, there's a video of you making out with him. What else could it possibly be? She crossed her arms, her expression shifting to defiance. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing someone. But it's your fault, Nick. You've been so distant, so wrapped up in your work. I felt like I didn't exist anymore. Ah, the blame game. Classic. You really want to make this about me? I asked, my voice rising. You could have talked to me, Jessica. You could have told me how you were feeling. But instead, you chose to sneak around like a coward. She flinched but quickly recovered. You're overreacting. It was just harmless fun. He doesn't mean anything to me. Harmless, I barked. You kissed him, went to his apartment, and God knows what else. You call that harmless? She stayed silent, her jaw tightening. For a moment, I let the silence stretch, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us like a storm cloud. Then, I spoke again, my voice steady but firm. This isn't just about the affair, Jessica. It's about the lies, the disrespect, the complete disregard for the life we built together. I deserve better than this. Better than you. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't say anything. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. Do you have anything else to say? I asked. She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Good, I said, because I'm done listening. After our confrontation, Jessica stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the empty wine glass she'd left on the counter. My mind was racing, but one thing was crystal clear. There was no coming back from this. That night, I slept on the couch. Well, slept is a generous term. I spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the argument in my head. Her excuses, her lies, her attempt to blame me. It all churned in my stomach like poison. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Jessica came downstairs around 8 a.m., her face puffy from crying. For a moment, I thought she might try to apologize, to grovel and beg for forgiveness. Instead, she walked straight to the coffee maker and poured herself a cup like nothing had happened. So what now? She asked casually, leaning against the counter. The audacity of her nonchalance sent a fresh wave of anger through me. What now? I repeated, my voice tight. Now you pack your things and find somewhere else to stay. This marriage is over. Her eyes narrowed. Over? Just like that. Jessica, you've been lying to me for weeks. Months, probably. You've been sneaking around behind my back. And the only reason you're not still getting away with it is because I caught you. So yeah, it's over. You made sure of that. She scoffed, setting her mug down with a loud clink. Wow, Nick. Real mature. You're just going to throw away 10 years over one mistake. One mistake. I snapped, standing up from the table. This wasn't a mistake, Jessica. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. You made a choice. Every single time you went to see him, every time you lied to my face. Don't you dare minimize what you did. She crossed her arms, her jaw set stubbornly. And what about you? You spied on me, followed me like some creepy stalker. Don't pretend you're the victim here. I laughed bitterly. I am the victim, Jessica. You cheated. I caught you. That's the story. And as for spying, I wouldn't have had to if you hadn't been sneaking around like a teenager. She didn't have a response to that. I spent the rest of the day packing her things into boxes. She tried to argue at first, insisting she wasn't going anywhere. But when she realized I wasn't budging, she called Brittany to come pick her up. Watching her leave was surreal. She didn't look back, didn't say goodbye. Just tossed her suitcase into Brittany's car and drove off like she was heading to a weekend getaway. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This was the woman I'd shared my life with, the woman I'd thought I'd grow old with. But that sadness was quickly drowned out by relief. The house felt lighter without her. That evening, Matt came over with a six-pack of beer. "How are you holding up?" he asked as he sat down on the couch. "Better than I thought I'd be," I admitted. "It hurts. But honestly, I'm glad it's over. She's been checked out of this marriage for a long time. I just didn't want to see it." Matt nodded, taking a swig of his beer. "You deserve better, man. She never appreciated you. At least now you can move on." He was right. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I thought I'd reached the end of the story. Jessica was gone, the marriage was over, and I could finally start putting my life back together. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Started 2 days after Jessica left. I was going through the closet, clearing out the last of her things, when I found something that stopped me cold. An envelope tucked into the back of the shelf. It had my name on it, written in Jessica's familiar handwriting. My first instinct was to toss it. What could she possibly have to say that I hadn't already heard? But curiosity got the better of me. I sat down on the bed and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper folded neatly. The note was short but chilling. "Neek, you think you're so smart, don't you? Always in control, always a step ahead. Well, here's something you didn't know. This wasn't just about me and him. He's been targeting you for months. You'll figure it out eventually. I'm just glad I won't be around to watch you fall. Jessica." My heart pounded as I read it again, trying to make sense of her cryptic words. Targeting me? What the hell did that mean? I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't bluffing. As much as Jessica loved to twist the knife, she wasn't one to fabricate something like this out of thin air. I decided to dig deeper. I started with the guy from the bar, the one Jessica had been sneaking around with. I'd gotten his license plate number during one of my surveillance nights, so I ran a search using some of my old PI contacts. His name was Ryan Coleman. 38, recently divorced, worked as a freelance consultant. On paper, he seemed unremarkable. But the more I looked, the more questions I had. His LinkedIn profile listed a string of vague, short-term jobs, none of which seemed to match the lifestyle he projected. I also noticed something else. One of his former employers was a competitor of the firm I worked for. A chill ran down my spine. Was this guy's connection to Jessica more than just an affair? The next day, I called Matt. "You're not going to believe this," I said, pacing the living room. "What now?" he asked, his tone wary. I told him about the letter, about Ryan's sketchy work history, and about the connection to my company. By the time I finished, Matt was silent. "Do you think Jessica knew?" he asked finally. "She had to," I replied. "Why else would she write that letter? It's like she wanted me to find out, but only after she was out of the picture." "Jesus, Nick," Matt said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out what the hell is going on." That evening, I made another call, this time to one of my contacts in cybersecurity. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Depends," he said. "What do you need?" "I need to know everything you can find about a guy named Ryan Coleman. I think he's been digging into my life." My contact agreed to look into it, but his warning echoed in my mind. If he's connected to someone big, this might get messy. "You sure you want to go down this road?" I wasn't sure, but I didn't have a choice. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and waiting. My cybersecurity contact, Eric, worked fast, and when he called me back, I could tell by the tension in his voice that he'd found something big. "Nick, you're not going to like this," he said. "Just tell me." I replied, bracing myself. Ryan Coleman isn't just some random guy. He's been connected to multiple cases involving corporate espionage. His MO is simple. He seduces someone close to a target, usually a spouse, and uses them to gather information. Bank accounts, project details, anything he can use to undermine his target's company. I felt the floor drop out from under me. You're saying Jessica was helping him spy on me? It's possible, Eric said. Or she might have been unaware. But either way, he's been digging into you. I found traces of him accessing public records, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's hacked into your personal accounts. My mind raced. The affair wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a calculated attack on my career, my reputation, my entire life. I decided to confront Ryan directly. I knew it was risky, but I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Using the address I'd tracked earlier, I drove to his apartment and parked across the street. The building was quiet, the kind of upscale place that screamed, pretentious bachelor pad. I took a deep breath and knocked on his door. He answered a moment later, wearing a smug grin that made my blood boil. "Nick," he said, leaning against the doorframe like he'd been expecting me. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You know damn well why I'm here," I snapped. "I know what you've been doing, Ryan. And I know this isn't just about Jessica." His grin widened, like a predator toying with its prey. "Jessica was fun," he said casually. "But you're the real prize, aren't you? Always so careful, so meticulous. But even you have blind spots." My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Why? Who put you up to this?" Ryan chuckled. "Let's just say your competitors aren't happy with how well you've been doing lately. They wanted a way in, and I gave it to them." I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Whatever you think you've got, it ends now. You don't touch my accounts, my projects, or anyone connected to me. Do you understand?" He didn't flinch. "And what are you going to do about it? Call the cops? Good luck proving anything without dragging your personal life through the mud." That was when I played my trump card. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, showing him the recording app. "You just admitted to espionage, Ryan. How do you think your buddies are going to feel when they find out you couldn't keep your mouth shut?" For the first time, his confidence wavered. "You've got nothing," he said, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "We'll see," I said, turning to leave. "But if I find out you've taken one more step into my life, you'll regret it." That night, I called Eric again. "How do we make sure this guy can't come after me anymore?" Eric had a plan. We'd gather everything, Ryan's digital footprints, his connection to my competitors, and the evidence from the affair, and deliver it to the authorities. But before I did that, I needed one more piece of the puzzle. Jessica. As much as I hated the thought, she might know more than I realized. I spent the night replaying Ryan's words in my head. If Jessica had been involved in his scheme, I needed to know. If she wasn't, she at least deserved to hear the full extent of the mess she'd stumbled into. Either way, it was time to confront her one last time. The next morning, I texted her. "We need to talk. Meet me at the diner on Main at 2 p.m. Her reply was almost immediate. "What's this about?" "Just be there," I wrote back, leaving no room for debate. Jessica showed up 10 minutes late, as always, sauntering into the diner like she owned the place. She was dressed to impress. Tight jeans, a tailored blazer, and that smug confidence I used to find endearing. Now it just pissed me off. "What's so urgent?" she asked, sliding into the booth across from me. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "It's about Ryan." Her expression froze for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "What about him?" "I know everything," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know he's been spying on me. I know he's tied to my competitors. And I know he used you to get to me." Jessica blinked, her face a mix of confusion and panic. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Jessica," I snapped. "He's a corporate spy, and he's been digging into my life through you. Did you know? Or were you just his pawn?" Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she was at a loss for words. I didn't know," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I swear, Nick, I didn't know anything about that. He told me he worked in consulting. That's all. I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was lying. After years of marriage, I thought I could read her like a book. But now I wasn't sure. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused? I asked, leaning forward. Your little affair wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It put my entire career at risk. My reputation. Everything I've worked for. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. Nick, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you do it? I demanded. Why him? Jessica wiped her eyes, her voice cracking. Because I felt invisible, okay? You were always so busy with work, so focused on your projects. I felt like I didn't matter anymore. And then Ryan came along, and he made me feel seen. I laughed bitterly. Seen? He used you, Jessica. He played you, just like you played me. She flinched, but I didn't stop. You want to feel seen? Fine. Because now, everyone's going to see exactly who you are. Her head snapped up. What do you mean? I've already started gathering evidence, I said coldly. On him, on you, on everything. When this is over, he'll be facing charges, and you'll be nothing more than a footnote in his downfall. Jessica's face crumbled. Nick, please, she begged. Don't ruin me. I didn't know I made a mistake. I'll do anything to fix this. I leaned back, my anger burning cold and steady. It's too late for that, Jessica. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. When I left the diner, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anger. It all swirled together, leaving me numb. Jessica had made her bed, and now Ryan would face the consequences. But the fallout was far from over. After my final confrontation with Jessica, I moved quickly to tie up loose ends. Eric helped me compile everything. Ryan's digital footprint, the evidence of his connection to my competitors, and his recorded confession. The case was airtight. I passed the information to a lawyer who specialized in corporate espionage, and within a week the authorities were involved. Meanwhile, Jessica's life began to unravel. Word about the affair started to spread among our mutual friends and family. I hadn't planned on sharing the details, but once people saw her moving out and started asking questions, the truth came out on its own. Jessica called me one night, crying. Nick, they're treating me like I'm some kind of monster, she sobbed. Brittany won't even return my texts. My parents are furious. I've lost everything. Her words didn't spark the pity she probably expected. Instead, they fueled my anger. Everything, I said coldly. Jessica, you didn't lose everything. You threw it away. And don't call me again unless it's about the divorce. Ryan wasn't faring much better. When the authorities confronted him, he tried to downplay his involvement, claiming Jessica had been a willing participant in his schemes. But the evidence didn't lie. Between the recordings, the digital trail, and the testimony of a few whistleblowers from his past gigs, he had no way out. I heard through my lawyer that Ryan's employer, the competitor who'd hired him, was also under investigation. Apparently, they'd been using guys like Ryan to sabotage rivals for years, and my case was just the tip of the iceberg. For once, karma seemed to be working in my favor. Despite everything, the fallout wasn't easy. I spent weeks alternating between anger and sadness, wondering how I'd missed the signs. Jessica's betrayal had blindsided me, and even though I'd taken control of the situation, the emotional scars ran deep. The house felt unbearably empty. I kept busy with work and projects, trying to fill the silence, but the memories lingered. One night, Matt came over with a bottle of bourbon. You're handling this better than most people would, he said, pouring us both a glass. I shook my head. Doesn't feel like it. Some days I can barely get out of bed. That's normal, he said. But you've done everything right. You took a terrible situation and turned it around. Now you just have to figure out what's next. I stared at my drink, his words sinking in. What was next? I had no answers yet, but one thing was clear. I was done living in Jessica's shadow. It was time to rebuild. Not just my career, but my life. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Jessica didn't fight it. She didn't have the leverage, and after everything that came to light, it seemed like even she was ready to cut her losses. We split what little needed dividing, and just like that, a decade of my life was reduced to a stack of paperwork. I thought I'd feel some sense of closure, but when I walked out of the courthouse that day, all I felt was emptiness. Matt was waiting for me outside. "How are you feeling?" he asked, handing me a coffee. "Lighter," I said after a pause, "but also, like I've got a lot of work to do." "That's a good thing," he said with a small smile. "Rebuilding's a hell of a lot better than being stuck." The weeks that followed were a slow climb out of the darkness. I poured myself into my work, not just to distract myself, but because I genuinely wanted to rebuild my career and reputation. Thanks to the evidence I'd gathered, Ryan and my competitor faced heavy penalties, and my company emerged stronger than ever. I also started taking care of myself in ways I hadn't in years. I picked up running again, something I'd abandoned early in my marriage. I even joined a local hiking group, where I met people who weren't connected to my old life. People who didn't look at me with pity or whisper behind my back. That's how I met Claire. She was different from Jessica in every way. Calm where Jessica had been fiery. Grounded where Jessica had been flighty. Claire wasn't the type to seek attention or dominate a room. But when she spoke, people listened. We started as friends, grabbing coffee after hikes and talking about everything from work to books to life in general. She'd been through a rough divorce herself, so there was no pressure, no rush to make things more than they were. But one night, as we sat by a bonfire at a group camping trip, I realized I wanted more. "Claire," I said, staring into the flames, "I don't know if I'm ready for anything serious, but I feel something with you. Something good." She smiled, her eyes soft. "I feel it too, and we can take it slow. No rush." For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt hope. Reflecting on everything that happened, I've come to realize a few things. Jessica's betrayal was devastating, but it forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. About her, about myself, about the life we'd built together. I won't lie and say it was easy, or that I don't have scars. But those scars don't define me. They're just a reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. If you're going through something similar, know this: you're stronger than you think. The pain doesn't last forever, and there's always a way forward. You just have to take the first step. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.